All right. We're going to go ahead and get going. This is the, I don't know, fifth annual increment report refresher orientation training. Um, I'm John Robinson in Ag Eco, and among other things, I coordinate the increment report process. Um, Before you blame me, let me tell you, I didn't ask for that assignment. It kind of came with the job. But I'm the campus-based ag econ specialist. My day job is to travel around, given the outlook for the price of cotton. Um, but I do coordinate this increment report process, which I'm going to describe. For the benefit of the newcomers, I'm going to kind of begin at the beginning. Let me just say, if you want to get my attention, if you want to ask me a question, if my slides are screwed up or said something confusing, I'd really prefer that you interrupt me and ask me or point something out to me. I have Dr. Garcia helping me, but I'll take all the help I can get. So don't be bashful. This is a good opportunity. Well, I mean, we're not going to take 2 hours, believe me. Won't fill 1 hour, but we have time for you to ask. I mean, take the time to ask specific questions about your county, about how to do this, about what this means. What just don't come away from here uninformed or confused, more confused. Um, Take the time, ask me the question. We can hang on and talk about it. This whole recording is going to be posted on the Ag Econ website, and I'll show you where. It's also going to get posted in Aspire, which I've never done that, but I gather that's going to happen uh, with this thing. So there'll be ways for you to follow up and come back and get into some of the things I'm going to be showing you. So with that, there we go. So people want to know, what is this thing? I took this job and now I'm told I've got to do this. What the heck is an increment report? And frankly, I don't really know where the name came from, unless it means a comparison of ag values this year compared to the previous year, the incremental change. That's the only way I can figure out that name. It's kind of an odd name. But what it used to be, literally, is a report like like this, a book, and it's actually 13 books. And it was table after, you can't see this, tables and charts, and it was basically a bunch of data. It's a compilation of ag farm gate values for a given calendar year. That's literally what it is. One for every district and one for the state. And so there were 13 books in the old days. And then we got out of the book business for various reasons, not the least of which was I got a printing bill one time that was unexpected. So now what it is a report that lives online. The books are PDF files, and they live online. They've always been at the Ag Eco Extension website, which is this URL up at the top here. Um, and under the resources menu, you can find the increment report page. You can also go straight to it by hitting that hot link or that hot link. And if you do that, you'll get to the increment reports subpage of the Ag Eco Extension website. And this is what it looks like. If you click on that link that says all about the increment report, it'll give you a one-page blurb that a couple of my colleagues wrote up, just a little short description. If you click on the second link that says a recording, that's what this recording is going to be. That what's there right now is last year's recording. And if you click on any of those links with a date, it's going to give you it's going to give you links to the online PDF version of the 13 books. So your district book will be in there, your county will be in that district book, and the Texas books aggregates up from the 12 districts. Something else that's new that I'll talk about a little bit more. Well, actually, I'll show you if you click on the 23, this is what you're going to see. Again, you're going to see the Texas book and books for districts 1 through 12. And then something that's new is we've taken this one step further for Brent Batchelor's region. For those counties, we have done sort of an automated version of economic impacts analysis, we being Dean McCorkle and Dan Hanselka, who do that sort of thing for a living. And so for those particular counties, using the 23 data, they have come up with kind of a standardized, they take your increment report numbers and they run it through their economic impact models, and they calculate jobs and value added additions to the local economy, etc. Which here's the one for Archer County. Looks like that. And all the other counties look similar, they just have different numbers. Now, these guys are in the process of doing this for your county, every county, all 254 counties, using 23 data. And I'm told they won't be finished doing that for all the other counties till sometime probably in early 2025. But it's going to become kind of basically an automated process. It'll live on the AgEco website under, well, go backwards. Anyway, it'll be under that link that says County Economic Impact Reports. So that's hopefully a motivation, because that's something we want you to be able to use for interpretive events. And that's the kind of thing typically that the increment report has been used for, is economic impacts at the regional level, now at the county level. It's a good source of data for that. In fact, it's the only source of data for that. USDA, National Ag Statistics Service, is the agency that's charged historically with keeping track of the value of agriculture, but they've been cutting back, and they keep cutting back because budget cuts and lack of manpower, whatever. They don't keep track of county data anymore. They don't keep track of other certain kinds of data anymore. They don't keep track of minor crops anymore. And so we're really the only source of that. So the increment report is becoming increasingly in demand. What else do I want to? The numbers that are in there are supposed to represent farm gate values of production, agricultural production, defined broadly, for the calendar year. So what we're thinking about is, what's the value of stuff in Texas that was produced in 2024? We're looking back at 2024. And the emphasis is on things that are produced. So if you're talking about crops, the value of, price times production in your county, that's that by crop. If we're talking about animals produced, it's all the animals that were born and sold. If we're talking about value added livestock production, like weight gain on fed steers and weight gain on stockers, it's the value of the gain. And anything else that we can put a value on, hunting, fishing, lumber's in there. There's all kinds of categories, so try to claim everything we can. So the emphasis is on production, value of production. So I'm going to throw this next question out here. So what if you turn in your report to me and there's an entry there that says, in my county, there's 500 horses and they're roughly $1,000 a piece. If you tell me that, what I'm going to conclude is 500 horses were born and sold. They were created. That is, the production was the birth of and selling of 500 foals. That's what I'm going to interpret from this statement. But I don't think that's what that person meant when they put that. What they meant incorrectly was, there's an inventory that's worth $1,000 a head. We get the same thing reported with cattle. They'll say there's 10,000 cattle in my county and they're worth $1,000 a piece. Well, that's, unless you're talking about something being born and sold or something getting heavier, that's not production. So we've got to make this distinction between the value of inventory of a stock of animals versus things that are produced. The emphasis for the increment report is stuff that's produced. And we'll get into many, many examples of that. A little motivation, this is a chore. for you and it's a chore for me, but it's always going to be there. My first job was at Mississippi State. They did the exact same thing. It was actually my job there too. And the reason is because administration finds it useful, and it is useful. I mean, they're talking to the legislature. They're talking about the importance of agriculture, economic impacts. This is the data that lets them, and frankly, your immediate administrators and you, this is the data that lets you talk about how important ag is in your region. Uh, so administration uses it in all kinds of ways. Other agencies of state government use it, including the governor's office, the comptroller's office, various county government people. USDA uses, as USDA cuts back on collecting this kind of information, they call me up every April and say, is your data set ready? And I'll say, yeah, it's coming. But they're coming to us to get particularly data at the county level, particularly data on specialty crops and stuff like that, because they don't frankly collect it anymore. And trial lawyers call up and other people that I wish wouldn't. But anyway, this stuff is in demand. It's always going to be in demand. We're always going to have to do it. So my general point is do it in such a way that makes it useful for you. And if you give us good, the old statement, garbage in, garbage out. If you give us the best numbers you can on the input side, we can generate good economic impact numbers with those reports that we'll be generating at the county level going forward. And there's other things that I know the increment report has been used for, like if you're doing an emergency label for a chemical, Section 18 emergency use label, there has to be economic impacts associated with that, particularly if it's a minor crop or a vegetable crop. Increment report is what's going to be used to satisfy that labeling requirement. And every time we have a hurricane or a fire or a drought, the increment report data gets used for that too. So it's important. It's always going to be there. We're always going to have to do it. So let us help you do it. Let us help you the best we can to get the job done and to get you through it. That's the purpose of this training today. I think that's the sermon I just preached. So, all right. So here's the process. We pretty well stick to this process. We tinker with a few things, but we pretty much do the same thing every fall. In this case, on Halloween, administration kind of sends out a heads up memo saying, "Hey, it's coming." And then about a week later, they emailed it out in my name. So you would have gotten, you and your county office email would have gotten an email from me. We sent them to both sources, trying to bombard everybody so that you would hopefully get it one way or the other. So the emails went out from us, and what's in that email is your increment report form that needs to be completed for your specific county. That's attached to that email. There's a general Excel worksheet, kind of a calculator that's attached to that email. And there's some price data, some USDA prices as an information source attached to that email. Now, if you didn't get that email, call me. My number's going to be in here, various places, or email me. My email's in here, and I'll resend it to you. Okay. If you're missing an email from John Robinson that had attachments to it, then let me know. We'll get it to you. So that happens. Those emails went out in early November. We've got 2 months for y'all to do the necessary data collection, number crunching, getting help as you need it. The deadline to complete the county increment report form for the 2024 column of numbers is at the last Friday in January. That stuff gets turned into your immediate district administrator. They collect them, they may proofread them, they may give them to the district economist, or probably they're just going to send it on to the 5th floor, and we'll get them from Dr. Kelm's office. And then we spend 2 months error checking, because comparing your numbers that you turned in for 24 with previous years to make sure they're kind of in the same ballpark, or to look for huge swings higher or lower. Anyway, we do a lot of error checking. And then we update the what were the books, the PDF tables and charts and pie charts and what have you, and all that gets published usually in the month of May. Okay, so that's the process. You might imagine that January gets a little bit busy with people, you guys, trying to get this chore out of the way before livestock shows and stuff. So January gets pretty frantic. But like I say, if you can't find the original email from me, send me an email. I tend to reply to those things right off my phone, and I can resend the original email. So don't hesitate. Let us help you, and we'll get it done one way or the other. I keep referring to the increment report form. This is what I'm talking about. This is Henderson County. Um, the increment report form has columns for previous years, and those columns, the numbers in those columns are in thousands. So that in silage in 2021 for 1,500, that's really 1.5 million. It's expressed in thousands. And what the task at hand is to fill in the numbers for 2024. Okay. Now, what's on here circled in red is on this worksheet. It's kind of what we're driving for. So I'm going to spend some time going over this worksheet. We created this. This is an automatic Excel file. It's got formulas in it. It does calculations. I created it with the idea of giving you some guidance about, what you need to keep track of, what needs to be multiplied against what, particularly for livestock. But I'll talk about other data sources. The worksheet. I'm not that proud of the worksheet. I mean, it's a tool, but what I'm saying to you is make it work for you. Okay. I will also beg you to please turn your worksheet in when you turn that in completed, turn this in too. And I don't care if you save this Excel file with a county specific name, or if you print this Excel file on paper, or if you save this Excel file as a PDF file. I don't care how you do it, but I'm going to tell you that it is incredibly useful for us to have whatever calculations you do. And I'm not saying you have to have calculations for every number that you give me, but for every calculation that you do, it makes our life infinitely easier if we can see whatever numbers you put there and match them against some calculations here, because then we don't worry. Oh, his wheat number is 40% higher than last year, but here's his wheat calculation. Yeah, that acres seem reasonable. That yield seems reasonable. That's a reasonable price. And I'll spend 5 minutes proofreading your report instead of 30 worrying about, well, how did he get that number, so big? We sleep easier and we get through things faster and we proofread better if we have some of the calculations that you use to come up with your numbers. So that's why I'm going to spend some time going through this worksheet. I can already see there's an error on that down in the lower right where it says conversion table in the fourth column. There's dollar signs on those numbers. They shouldn't be dollar signs. What that says is, like, for corn, there's 56 pounds of corn in a bushel of corn. It's just a conversion, and for some reason that got formatted as dollars. So it's not perfect. Hopefully that's the only error there is. Another thing I'll point out about this worksheet is in every section of it, over here on the right, it says type notes here. You can type in that big square. You can probably get about one good sentence in there before it'll wrap around, but it'll start wigging out. But you can type short little notes in there, and I welcome, if you're turning the worksheet in to me, and you did some calculations and you made some assumptions, or you had a question about this or whatever, you can note stuff and note it to me. And I'm going to, as corny as it sounds, I'm going to ask you to please do that. Just use it. to tell me whatever you want about how to interpret this number or what you did or why this is this or why, if wheat went from 50,000 acres in your county to zero, that's the kind of thing you could put over here. By the way, they zeroed out all our wheat. And then I'll think, okay, well, that's why the wheat number went to zero. And stuff like that is helpful. It's when you're proofreading 254 increment reports and worksheets, it's really helpful to have all the guidance we can get. All right, so this is what we're driving to. The numbers that are in this red circle get translated from the report form to get translated from the worksheet to the report form, except that these are expressed in thousands. These are the actual numbers is what gets calculated there. All right. I think I said all that. And another, having told you please, asked you please to give me your worksheets, there's some occasionally there's a bit of a problem that happens when people do give us their worksheets, which I very much want them to do. But sometimes I'll get a worksheet that has calculations and has final numbers, and I'll compare it to the increment report form there, and the numbers are completely different. And not because they're divided by 1,000, they're completely different numbers. And when that happens, that puts me in a kind of a odd situation of having to guess, well, which numbers are correct? I might be inclined to think you probably did these first, and then you put in these numbers second, and maybe you were more informed when you put the increment report form numbers in. Maybe you got off the phone with somebody and said, no, 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 it's not 1 million, it's 10 million. Oh, okay. And you changed the number here, but you didn't change the number here. I wonder about those kinds of things, but what I'll just leave you with is, if you would, double check when you translate stuff from whatever you're using to calculate to the increment report form. Just double check them, and it'll save me some wondering. What I don't want to have to do ultimately is call you and say, your increment report says this, your worksheet says that. Which one's right? I don't want to have to bother you, and I frankly don't want to have to take the time to call a whole bunch of counties. This happens in about 10 or 20 reports that I'm going to get are going to have this kind of situation where there's something obviously different, and I've got to come to some resolution about which one is right. And I'd rather not be left making assumptions. Okay, I'm going to give a little bit of discussion about the elements of this worksheet to try to entice you to use it. When we're talking about the value of production of crops, then it's pretty straightforward. We're talking about harvested acres times yield times the price equals a value. So there's a column here, the first one for acres. There's a column for yield, the second column. The third column is in gray. That means you can't type in it. It's got a formula that's going to multiply those first two columns. And then when you add a price into the fourth column, it's going to put a value on that crop production. That's how this worksheet works. And it's how the next two or three worksheets work. So let me talk about acres, and I'm going to speak more generally about where you can get help getting data on crop acres in your specific county. And there's a number of different places. If depending on the crop, if there's a processing center like a cotton gin or a grain elevator or a cattle sale barn or a slaughterhouse, there's experts that work in those businesses that generally keep up pretty well with the acres of the crops or the heads of livestock that are supplying those processing centers. So there's agribusiness experts you can ask to get a feel for acres. There's crop specialists who probably have a pretty decent notion about acres of crops. There's organizations like, I'll say, Plains Cotton Growers or South Texas Cotton and Grain Producers, advocacy organizations, crop organizations that they make their money off of assessment of crop growers. So they probably have a pretty decent idea. For cotton, there's the Boll Weevil Foundation. They keep track of cotton acres in different regions of the state. So there's expert opinion that you can get, but the most detailed, absolutely, well, there's one more too. Particularly if you're new to a county, I would go to this website. Up there's the URL up at the top. I'd go to what I call the Quick Stats website, and I would click on for any of these particular crops. If you want to know what's happened, not in 2024, but in recent years, 23 and 22, probably the two more recent years, and just get a feel for what's been grown in your county in the past, just to sort of orient yourself. You can click on any of these quick stat links and click your county, and there'll be data there on what's been planted, what's been harvested, what's been produced, and that's somewhat useful. There will also, down at the bottom, you can get cattle inventory, either dairy cattle, dairy cows, or beef cows, or cows and calves. The actual number of head in your county as of January 1, you can get that detailed kind of information from, again, this particular website. So it's a good source of not only acreage data, but other stuff. But by far, the best source of detailed crop data of all sorts, minor crops, horticultural crops, forage crops, is from USDA FSA, what they call the certified acres data. And so if you're new, forget the increment report. You ought to do this. Go here. You ought to go here every fall. And if you go through the process of what I'm about to describe to you and just look at those data, maybe save it to your computer in an Excel file, you'll be one of only about 3 people in your county that'll ever do that, but that'll make you the expert by default about what's grown in your county. So I would, as an analyst, I would encourage you to do that just for your own edification. But to get these data, here are the steps that you got to go through. You go to this website, FS up at the top, and on all these, I don't expect you to be scribbling things down. This is going to be posted. I'm hovering over these slides so that people can go back to the recording, go to the slide, get all the URLs, and do the calculations that I'm going to show you later. I don't expect you to absorb all that right this second, but it's gonna be here. It's going to be recorded. So come back here, get this URL, go to the latest download of data, which is the November 1st. If you click that, it's going to download a file to your downloads folder of your computer, whatever computer you're using. It's going to put a zip file in that downloads folder. Okay. You click on that zip folder and there'll be an Excel file inside that zipped up folder. And that's the name of the Excel file is this 2024 FSA acres web 110, 124. If you open up that Excel file, it's going to open to the first tab, which says plant and fail. But what you want is the tab that I've circled in red over to the right called County Data. You click on that tab, it's going to load this. Now this is intimidating. This is an alphabetized list of crops by county, by state, starting with Autauga County, Alabama. You can scroll down 150,000 rows, or you go up to the very top column, the column header, the 4th column where it says state, and you click on that little downward pointing arrow, and it'll pull down a menu, and you can pick Texas, and you can get there a lot faster by picking Texas out of that 4th column and picking your county name out of that 5th column. And even if you do that, there'll be 50 rows of a bunch of obscure vegetable and garden crops and truck crops in addition to the major crops. But you can see if you look over here under crop, there's major crops, forages, all kinds of stuff, and more detail about it. And then it's got even more columns about whether it's like grain grown for grain or grain grown for forage, whether it's irrigated or not, what the planted acres were, what failed. You could subtract off the failed acres and the prevented acres, and then you come up with a guess of harvested acres, which is the acres that you want, harvested acres. But like I say, if I were you, if I was new to a county, I would recommend doing this and sticking it in an Excel file on your computer and just look at it twice, you know, once or twice a year, and just to get a feel for what all the detail of stuff that's being produced in your county. That would make you the expert by default just by glancing at it, because nobody else probably even knows it's here. Um, but anyway, this would be an excellent source for the increment report calculations, and that'd be the kind of stuff that you put in this first column, the first tan column that says acres, some estimate of harvested acres, at least of the major crops. All right, having done that, the next thing again, we're valuing production, and production is harvested acres times yield times price. So we need to have some notion of the yields in 2024. Where are you going to get yield data? Well, you can get yield data from the same, I'll skip to here. You can get yield data from the same authoritative sources that you get acreage data from. You can presumably have a crops committee, major growers, large acreages. You could, certainly ask them. Were yields higher or lower? Were they average? Were they like last year or the year before? Get some notion of the trend in yields in 2024. You can ask your agronomy specialists. You can look at their crop trials, their race trials, your trials. You got some yield data there. Maybe that if you think it's representative of the whole county, you could use that as a source of data. Um, So there's different ways to get at that. Like I said, there's historical yield data from 2 years ago, and by clicking on these quick stats and then choosing your county for all these particular crops. Now there was something I wanted to say about cotton. We tried to automate the cotton a little bit in that if you put acres of cotton lint on the cotton line and put a yield for cotton lint on the second column on the cotton line, then you'll notice the cottonseed are gray boxes. You can't type anything in there, but if you give me acres and yield of lint, it's going to calculate by formula. It's going to calculate the tons of cottonseed per acre based on the pounds of lint that you entered in above. And then all that's left for you to do is to put in a price for cottonseed over to the 1, 2, 3, fourth column of entries. But anyway, cottonseed is automatic. If you enter the lint numbers, it's going to put the cottonseed yield and volume. It'll calculate those automatically. Okay, so that third column is a calculation basically of acres harvested times yield, and it does it. You put numbers in the first two, it calculates it in the third column, and then all that's left after that is coming up with prices. Where do we get price data from? Well, we sent you some price data. One of the email attachments to the original emails in early November included USDA Texas prices as of the month of October and USDA US crop prices as of the month of October. And you could use those. You could also, again, you could ask your crops committee, what was the average price? What did you sell corn for this year? You could get expert opinion from various people. You can ask your district economist. He's probably going to turn around and ask me for cotton, or Mark Welch for grain, or David Anderson for livestock. That's fine. That's our job. So we'll get word back to you one way or the other. You can call us straight out and say what was the price of major crops, and we'll tell you what we thought it was in the month of, or in the year of 2024. But anyway, price data goes here, and once price data are entered, they're multiplied by the volume, and that's what gives the value of crop production. Oh, one more thing I wanted to say. Those USDA Texas prices and U.S. prices for crops as of the month of October, those two files, they were attached to the original emails, and they're also in the chat that you can download from this Teams call. so that there's documents, file transfer documents that you can get out of the chat. If you have any trouble with that, ask my expert, Dr. Garcia. Okay. Again, kind of what I would consider obvious authorities locally to give you prices of things if you can't find prices from any other source. Ag lenders are a good source of price data. If you're on good speaking terms with an ag lender, they know it. They keep track of it because they loan money against that sort of thing. Okay. Okay. Here's an example of one of those USDA price October prices. It looks like this. So if you open up that file that's attached to your email, or open up one of the files that's in the chat, it's going to look like that. And you click on that PDF, and it'll give you a current USDA estimate of major crop prices. And the calculations are there. Okay. I put this in here to make the point that I made earlier. That is, I'm not so proud of this worksheet that I expect you to just fill it with every calculation under the sun. You know, it's for your benefit. It does help us. So I would love to get them back from you with however many or few calculations you actually use it for. And you can also use it. I've got this Bible quote in here to say that this worksheet was created for you and not the other way around. So I've been asked, sometimes people are using the worksheet and they're entering all their other stuff and making calculations, and then they just say, John, for hay, I'm not making a calculation. I didn't have yields of hay and acres of hay. I was just told that there was $1 million worth of hay. Can I just enter that on the worksheet? And I say, yeah, put $1 million right in that price column, and right next to it, just type a 1, because the value of crop production is going to be the multiplication of the price column and the preceding column. So you can make this worksheet work any way you want. If you're entering an uncalculated single large number, then just put a 1 for volume, and the worksheet will accept it. So make it work for you. Okay, so I'm kind of repeating myself on purpose. We're about the business of estimating production of crops and livestock and other things in 2024. For crops, I consider, because I go over this every year, so it's straightforward to me, but it's crops values are fairly straightforward in that it's acres times yield times price. And we automate a few things in the gray columns where we're doing calculations. So you're entering things in those tan columns, which in the acres column, it's acres, and then yield per acre, and then a price per unit. Be clear on your units. Okay. Talk a little bit about the different categories of crops that are in this worksheet and are in your increment report form, because you didn't choose them, we did over many, many years. So just so that you know what we're saying when we put those crops in there, we break it down by food crops. We consider white corn and rice and rye and wheat to be food crops. The feed crops is barley and yellow corn or field corn, and the ensilage and the hay go in the feed crops category in our way of thinking, and sorghum and oats and other small grains are in there too. Other small grains that are fed to animals are in the feed crops section. Cotton's got its own section, again, with cottonseed being calculated as a function of the length numbers that you put in there. We've got oil crops as there as well. Got swallow said there. There's all kinds of hay, but there's not that many different subcategories to report it, so it's going to get lumped into hay. If you want to write me a note and say, I'm splitting out this hay or that hay, or it's all this type of hay, you can write me whatever notes you want, and frankly, I'll be grateful for the knowledge and for the clarity. Keep scrolling on through here. I think I've said all this stuff. So on to other kinds of crops. We have worksheets for vegetables. We have worksheets for fruits and miscellaneous crops. We break out major vegetables in separate lines. So there's a line for cantaloupes, honeydews, and watermelons. There's also a line that just says melons. What I would, well, some people have melons that are not cantaloupes, honeydews, and watermelons. If you can put them on another line and write me a note if you've got some kind of exotic thing, which some people do. Sweet corn, in our way of thinking, is a vegetable, so we put sweet corn here and not back up in the food grain. Um, there's a category called other vegetable, which is a catch-all for everything under the sun. And the one thing I'll say about vegetables, having worked in Weslaco and being with the vegetable industry, there are some wacko units like 7/10 bushel cartons. There's some weird units for fruits and vegetables. And they're not weird to the people in the industry. They're odd to me. So just be careful when somebody says, yeah, the yield is 7 cartons per acre or 70 cartons per acre. Make sure you know what a carton is, how, and make sure that the price that you get matches the per unit yield. And these are what those worksheets look like. Again, they have a long list of stuff here, but there's so many vegetables under the sun that, just fit it into other vegetables if you don't have an otherwise name for it. And the same for the fruits. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of fruits. Then we have a section called miscellaneous crops. For some reason, alfalfa has always been treated as miscellaneous crop instead of a hay. Anyway, there it is. And a whole bunch of things. Uh, there's a place for nursery. And this is one where, again, you want to record it, and I would bless you if you did, reflect it in your worksheet as well as your increment report form. You're probably not going to get information like, you're not going to, it doesn't make sense to talk about acres of nursery crops because they're sold in pots or some other container. So you're probably going to get data like, yeah, our business does $5 million in sales of this nursery or total nursery or turf or whatever. You're going to get a single number, which again, you can stick that single big number in the price column and put a 1 in the volume, and it'll multiply through and record it on this worksheet if you want to do that. And I would be happy if you did. So make it work for you, however best. And if you've got questions about how to make stuff work, how to record stuff, or how to treat any particular one, feel, call me. I'll give you my best shot. It'll be easier for me to talk to you about it at the beginning than it will be in April when I'm trying to reconcile your worksheet and your increment report form and figure out what you did if you didn't write me notes then. So, all right, that brings us to livestock. The value of production of crops is simple because in comparison, the value of livestock production can be a bit challenging, and we tend to find more errors in this realm. Before I leave the crops, actually, let me just say, where do I find the most mistakes in the crop section, particularly the traditional crop section? Where do you think I find most of the errors? Most of the errors are, if you look down here where it has the conversion table of pounds per bushel, most of the errors that we find are somebody taking a yield that's in hundredweights and multiplying it times a price that's in dollars per bushel. That's the source of most of the errors that we see here. It's mixing units of grains, particularly. We get some errors in cotton too. Somebody, I'll be looking at the increment report form for your county, and the cotton number is, interestingly, 100 times as large as it was in the previous 3 years. And if you gave me your worksheet, I would come in and look and I'd say, oh, were you meant to put 75 cents a pound for the price? You just put 75, which this Excel file is going to think is $75 per pound. So a little orders of magnitude get off because a decimal isn't a number, is a whole number and not a decimal, or it's because of the conversion of 100 weights per acre being multiplied, or 100 weights per acre being multiplied by dollars per bushel. That's the biggest source of error. There'll be a handful of those things this year when we review it, but I'm kind of trained to zero in on those errors. What's a bigger challenge is in the livestock area, and we've been trying to work on making it less of a challenge. But anyway, here's the livestock worksheet. It's got categories. There's the poultry. Below that's dairy. Below that's a whole bunch of things that we call beef, subcategories of the beef category, and then other meat animals and other stuff, honey and mohair and wool. The biggest source of errors here is going to be basically two sources: the value of fed beef and the value of stockers. The most common error is somebody will say, well, in my county, I was told there was 10,000 head of cattle and that they were worth $1,000 a head. Okay. The problem with that is what that probably means is the value of the inventory. Yeah, there may be 1,000 head, 1,000 mama cows, and they may be worth $1,000 a piece, but that's not value of production. Production is calves who are born, or horses who are born and sold. So it's animals that are born and sold. It's the value per head of that, or it's fed beef that it's the value of their gain, and stockers, the value of their gain. But the error is when people report the value of the inventory of animals. That there's a standing herd of animals in this county, and they're worth so much per head. But that's not a production number. That's sort of a asset value, but it's not what we're looking for here. So particularly to avoid this problem of the value added weight gain error, we created these little boxes at the bottom. There's one for fed beef and there's one for stocker cattle. You could put summer stocker numbers in that stocker cattle, or you could put winter stocker numbers, and David Anderson provides both on a separate sheet. We went ahead and inputted here, and this, by the way, the worksheet is also a file that you can download from the chat of this presentation. We emailed it to you in November, and we'll send it to you again if you need it. But the value added calculation is actually presented for fed beef. It's presented in that box. You got the starter weight, you got the finish weight, you got the value of both, and you subtract, and that gives you the value of the gain of the average feeder, according to David, would be about $660 per head. So that is automatically stuck up in there in the middle of this table where it says fed beef. You can see a 660. It's grabbing that from this calculation down here. You could change these numbers if you think you have more customized, accurate numbers for starter weights and finishing weights, and the price per hundredweight of the starter and the price per hundredweight of the finisher. You can put your own numbers in there if you want. I stuck David's in there because I don't know squat about livestock, and I would just ask him. And if you ask me, I'm going to ask him on your behalf. So anyway, I stuck those numbers in there, and it'll automatically calculate what the added value per head is. And then all you have to do is put in the number of head, and it'll calculate the final number. Same thing with the stockers. These are summer stocker numbers I've got in here. David also gave us on his cheat sheet, gave us winter stocker numbers, and you could plug them in and it will calculate that. Now, does anybody see a problem with the stocker cattle number in the middle of the spreadsheet? Or do you have a question about it? There's 3.6 with parenthesis around it. In Excel, that means that's a negative number. Can that be right? Is that something that can happen? Can you lose money on summer stocker cattle actually lose money per head? Yes, the answer is yes. Um, it's happened before. Um, what happened is that the price fell from $318.6 to 243.97. The price fell so much during the season that it actually came out to be a losing proposition. So you put the number of head that we're doing that, it'll give you a loss. It'll give a negative number in parenthesis over on the right hand side gray column. But that's the way it was this year on average, according to David. If you have better data for how things, for the weights of things and how they sold, you put your data in there. That's fine. Um, but don't be shocked if this thing spits out a negative number. You didn't do anything wrong there. That's just the way it worked out. Um, these are the two examples of using the worksheet for the value added calculations, which are, like I say, the most challenging and usually the most errors happen here. Um, I'm spending the time to go over this so that somebody can go back to the recording and see this again and hear me say it again and hear me say it again and hopefully let it sink in. But if you want to call me, I mean, we can talk at the end of this orientation, come back to here, or you can call me anytime and I'll be happy to try to think it through with you. If you got other stuff, livestock are also unique in that, you got populations of animals that don't change as much through time in a given area compared to, because of the inventory effect, the herd effect, compared to crops. Crops can, you can double the acres or cut the acres in half pretty fast in certain parts of Texas with certain crops, but there's a certain fixity to livestock inventories. If you're talking about birds in chicken houses, or if you're talking about, the cattle inventory in a county, they don't change that much, but it kind of leads to certain questions. Well, let's think about 2024. Was there a lot of herd liquidation in your county because of no forage? That could have a big effect compared to previous years. So you need to think about, was destocking. You need to think about, did a bunch of integrators open chicken houses or close them in a particular area? That could kind of create some big discrete changes. So those are things that can happen. Uh, Let me get on to here. All right. So what I was talking about with the value added, the value of weight gain is one thing. The more straightforward aspect of animal production is just new animals that are born and sold. So you can think of calves, foals, kids, lambs, and then other animals that are just happen to be sold in a given year, like cull cows and cull bulls and breeder stock. All of those are counted as dollars per head, whole, and it's the value of the sale of that animal in 2024. I've already gone through both of these errors, so I'll just skip on through. So the most common source of value, let's see, I already covered this. This is the fed beef example that I did with on the worksheet with the little box down below. And this is David's cheat sheet where I'm getting all these different dollars per head or dollars of the value of gain. It's all on this thing that I'm calling David's 2024 David Anderson's livestock value cheat sheet, which is also in the chat box and was also email. I actually emailed it in the reminder of this workshop earlier today. But if you didn't get that email, or if you can't get it off of um, out of the chat box, then send me an email. I'll send it to you. But he's got calf steer prices, heifer prices. He's got cull cows and cull bulls. He's got hog numbers. He's got sheep, goats, wool. Just a whole kind of list of different kind of prices that that he considers to be more or less reasonable for 2024 for average sizes and weights. The numbers that were in the worksheet came from, for slaughter steers, came right from here. You can just plug them into, take them from here. Well, they're already plugged into the worksheet. We inputted them. You can change them if you want. There's winter stocker numbers for pulling them off or grazing them out. And lastly, there's summer stocker numbers. I'm looking at the bottom of this page. Anyway, different ways to figure what the value of weight gain was that you can plug into the bottom of that worksheet, or just use the ones that are there, input the number of head that it applies to, and that'll give you that value added weight gain stuff. And the rest of these are prices per hundredweight or prices per head. I guess they're mostly prices per hundredweight. Yeah, I jumped ahead of myself before, but this is how it works. You plug the numbers into the calculation box for fed beef. It comes out with 659.54. That gets automatically brought up there. You just need to input the number of head. Let's say pretend it's 1,000 head. Then the actual value of production is the weight gain value times the number of head. Here's the summer stocker example. Again, I'm hovering on these long enough so that somebody can come back to the video and hopefully make sense. But again, we got a starting weight and value, a finishing weight and value, happens to subtract to a negative number. There's some assumptions there about the grazing and the average daily gain. But those numbers are down here. They came from David. And they would plug in to the calculation box, or actually already entered, and they would come onto this other line that says other beef stocker cattle value. It's already there automatically. You plug in the number of head and it's going to calculate the negative number. All right. What about other sources of livestock in your county? Where do you get estimates of the number of cattle, the number of mama cows, the number of goats, the number of chicken houses? Where do you get that from? You get them from the processors. You get them from your livestock committee, large ranchers, large producers, animal science experts, and one other source of data, and that's the cattle inventory stuff. I'm going to skip over this, but if real fast, if you're in the rolling plains and you're trying to get stocker and it's not a drought, you can go back to that certified acres data, which breaks out the forages. It breaks out the wheat by what's grazed. It'll report acres grazed. Grazed and then pulled off and grown for wheat, and grazed out. Those two numbers right there give you a number that there's calves on it probably. And I'll dwell on this slide just briefly. You can use those numbers, those grazing acres of wheat, to back into using a grazing stocking rate, early season stocking rate, later season stocking rate, and you can back into the number of calves that would have been supported by that acre, that many acres. That's if you do that, you're kind of a old data nerd, but it's one way to get at it if you otherwise don't have any source of information about the number of stockers in your area, and you're in one of these regions that has stockers on wheat. All right, there's a whole bunch of, like I said before, categories about in the beef category. Calves being the major one, and that comes under other beef / calves. Breeder cattle are sold by the head, and David's got values for those. Cull cows and cull bulls go in the category called other beef slaughter cattle. And you can get to a source of data that would let you back into these numbers by going to this site here. I showed you this before. It's the Quick Stats site. If you click at the bottom of the Quick Stats site, where it says beef cows, milk cows, and all cattle, you click on that. You can then click on your county, and it's going to pull up something that looks like this. It's basically a January 1 inventory number for beef cows and milk cows and cows and calves in your county. And if you've got that data, then you can sort of back into the number of calves produced if you can't otherwise get estimates from experts, local experts. Now, the local ranchers, your animal science specialist, the local sale barn, there are people locally that probably have some notion about the number of calves in your region or in your county. But if you want to take a kind of a data-based approach, you can do what I'm fixing to show you here, and that is if you have the number of here, that's what I was looking for. If you have the inventory of cows, then what you need is some guesstimate of weaning rates, and then you can take David's price data and do an exercise like I'm about to show you here. I'll dwell on this just a minute. I don't expect anybody to absorb all these calculations. I'm hovering on this so that people can come back to it when they're viewing the recording. But let's say you have 9,200 cows in your county based on that inventory. You need to assume something about the weaning percentage. You need to assume that half of them are bull calves, half of them are heifer calves. You need to assume something about how many heifers are being held back as replacements. You make those assumptions and you can basically calculate the number of steers for sale, the number of heifers for sale. If we're assuming that they're that weight, then you could use David's prices for steers of that weight and heifers of that weight, and you can calculate the value of them being sold. And it's 5.6 million for the steers and 2.6 million for the heifers. And you can enter that value on the worksheet. You can enter it by putting that 8 million there and sticking a 1 there, and it'll show up there. Or what this is sort of a weighted. This is the sum total of the heifers and the steers in this example. 3818 plus 1978 gives you 5796. The total value is 8.2 million. If you divide that by the 5796, it'll give you a weighted value per head of 1421. And you could put all that on the other beef calves beef line, and the worksheet would take it, and I would know what you were talking about. So that's sort of the data nerd way to do it. Similarly, you can take cull cow, cull bull numbers based on the number of cows from the same inventory data. Again, assuming there's 9,200 beef cows, you can apply a cull rate to that, come up with the number of cows that you're assuming were sold in 2024. You can slap David's price on that, and you can come up with a total value of cull cows that would be in the slaughter cattle line. You can do the same thing with assuming a bull to cow ratio. You can, again, starting with the same inventory number, you can do some calculations to back into the number of bulls and apply David's cull bull price to that and come up with a value there. If you combine the two and get a weighted value per head, you enter it on the slaughter cattle line. If you have any questions about that after the fact, I know it's awfully confusing. I remember it from last year and the year before and the year before and the year before that I tried to explain it. I can talk you through this, or I can get together with your district economist and we can talk you through this, or you can come back and hover over this recording probably many times. But it's doable. It's doable, and the data are available. So if you have no idea where to start, I would say start with this cattle inventory stuff and make some reasonable assumptions, and you can populate some of the major sources of cattle related revenue by doing what we're doing. Of course, there's other stuff: poultry, meat animals, horses. Just remember with the horses, I'm gonna get a half a dozen reports turned into me that basically say the error example that I've already given you. I've got 1,000 horses. They're worth $1,000 a head. Okay, are you telling me that 1,000 were foaled and sold? You're probably not telling me that. You're probably telling me that you just happen to know how many horses are in your county and what they're worth. But that's an asset value kind of statement. That's not a value of production statement. We're after value of production. So we only want to know what was actually born and sold, not how much horse trading there is in your county. We're getting towards the end, so hang in there with me, and then we can go over whatever you like. There's an other ag-related worksheet, which includes categories of things that what we call ag-related is just a catch-all for everything else. But fishing and hunting and horses, there's fishing like going out on guided fishing tours, and there's fishing like fishing and paying money to fish in ponds. Whatever you can get data for, I would include. There's a question about lumber. A couple years ago, one of y'all from East Texas called me up and said, there's a source of lumber data, seems pretty consistent. Maybe we being the lumber East Texas counties, should be taking the same approach. And what he was talking about was down here where the Texas Forest info link, he was talking about this publication, and he was talking about these particular three sources of income: the forestry line, the logging line, and the primary solid wood products line. And I said, that seems like a great idea. And I just made an executive decision. Let's do that. Let's for these, at least for these counties, let's use those three numbers. The trouble is 2021 was the last year they published these numbers. Now I have checked with them, and they said they were updating and that they were going to come out with new numbers, but I don't know if that'll be for 2024 or not. It seems to be an irregular thing. So what I would say is, if you're in one of these East Texas counties, you can find out by going to this website what the values of these three items were in 2021, and I would extrapolate off of that. That's what I would do. I would use this as my baseline, and I would say, well, here we are 3 years out. I would assume that we're, I don't know, X% higher or lower than what was reported for these categories in 2021. That's what I would do. Or if you have another source, a better, more direct source of data, then use that. You might, for my benefit, you might drop me a little note and saying, I quoted so-and-so for this, or I got it from this data source. But anyway, this is how we've been handling the timber thing so far. There's a whole separate hunting and other land use worksheet where you can put lease rates, however they are, whether it's dollars per acre or dollars per gun, or however you want to report it to me. Just make it fit onto this worksheet. If you have data, tell me what it is, type me a note over here, and we can make it work. There's another recreation site for other stuff. I'm just going to skip over that. All right, so from the worksheets, things get summarized. You can take the values of production, which are the actual numbers, convert them into thousands, that is to say, divide them by 1,000 and complete the empty column on your increment report form. Do a little double checking that if you did calculations on the worksheet, that those final numbers are being correctly transcribed to the report form. I've already gone over these several times. Just watch out for common errors. And last but not least, so on the AgEco website, when we get this recording cleaned up and shortened, cut out the dead air at the beginning of it, it's going to get posted in two places. It's going to get posted on where we always post it, on the AgEco website under this link. That's agecoext.tamu.edu under the resources menu. It's going to get posted there. It's also going to get posted in Aspire, which I've never done before, but I've been told that I'm going to do it, so I'm going to do it. So it'll be available in various places for you to come back to and reference. If you can't remember, if you can't get here, if you had one specific question about something and you don't want to mess with the recording, you got a question about something, call me up. We're here to help you. The other thing I want to remind you of is sometime, hopefully in early 2025, it's not just the counties in this region, but all the counties are going to have economic impact summaries based on 2023 data, and we're hoping to automate this system so that every year when we do the increment report stuff, we just automatically generate new economic impact reports. So that's coming, and that's all I brought with me. So I'll hang around as long as anybody wants to ask questions. I appreciate you tuning in, and let us know if we can help you. And I can, you guys are the experts in the field, so if you have thoughts about better ways of doing things, I'm open to that. Open to that too, absolutely. I'll look at the chat.
John, we have a question for Billy.
Okay.
Hi, John. I just wanted to tell you that I sent you an email asking for the report form and worksheets and whatever you have for Fort Bend County. I'm a new agent, just started November 1st. I'm actually horticulture agent. However, I will be handling all of our commodity crop stuff in Fort Bend County, not necessarily animal stuff, cattle and that sort of stuff. However, we do not have an ag natural resource agent, haven't for about a year. So I think I'm going to be tasked with doing this report. So any help you can provide would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, you bet. I'll email it to you when we get off. But yeah, I'll be happy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Shackelford, do you have any administrative words of wisdom? I couldn't make that out. You're a little garbled, sorry.
He sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher.
Yeah, he kind of did. Wah, wah, wah. Other questions, things you'd like to see better. We can go back to the slides too. I'll cover anything anybody wants to dwell on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Had to back out. No, thanks for doing the training, John. Again, and this is all recorded, so anybody that was on this can go back and listen. So not too many people left on now, but that'd be the only administrative comments that I would have. District 9 and 11, everybody should have a calendar of events when y'all's are due. So I'd like to get them in a week or two early.
Dr. Shagford, can you send me that calendar? I don't think I have it.
Sure. Tell you what, I'll just bring you one next Tuesday. How's that?
Sounds good. Next Tuesday, the 17th, my calendar's wide open. Got me as long as you need me.
Okay, 9 a.m.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Last chance for questions, comments, frustrations. What you wish an ag economist would do for you. All right, then I think we're going to stop it now. Manuel, thank you for all your help.